Is financial crime never going to be solved in the future?
Well, I'll tell you, we'll never get solved, right? It's a cat and mouse game, and it always will be. It's a matter of looking to strengthen the enforcement of it, and that's done through various regulatory frameworks, international agreements, industry standards that we put in place, and they all have helped.
We've seen the adoption of Bitcoin all around the world and several other technologies around there. How do you see those technologies sort of converging with AI, especially around the financial industry and financial crime?
It's kind of a godsend when you think of a immutable ledger to be able to track movement. So I do believe that the blockchain is an immense help in that. And I think for us to be able to better train our models and be able to better evolve them responsibly, I think we need more ways where we have cross-industry or cross-firm collaboration.
Robert, welcome. Great to have you here on the World Digital Governance Forum. I know you've had a great background in the financial and technology industry, fintech, I should say. Working as the CIO at USAA as well as in a senior leadership role at UBS, and of course your experience in the stock exchange. So you've kind of really been in the guts of the financial industry. But really, this conversation is broader than the financial industry. It's about artificial intelligence, data, and how we want to govern our lives in the future, our digital lives. Increasingly, we're becoming more digital in nature. Part of my brain is already in my phone. It's all my memory out there, and soon it'll also be talking for me. So before we get there, we'd like to get into a little bit how you're thinking about digital governance. What prompted you to come into this forum? We'd love to have that conversation here and how you think this world would shape up.
Sure. Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to join you and everyone at the forum today. It's just such a broad topic. As you've mentioned, I've been working in banking, financial services, and insurance for the better part of 2 decades and watching the technology evolve. I've focused my career a lot on risk model development, particularly in the financial crimes domain, where we've seen kind of these very deterministic models and very linear models evolve into a lot more complex capabilities as we've started introducing machine learning and particularly AI now. And in the AI space, it's evolving so quickly, particularly in BFSI. I mean, there are just so many fantastic use cases for AI. But for me, it's really about balancing the development of AI with responsibility. And I think responsibility is the real key here, because depending on who you talk to or which position of the audience you take, responsibility can mean various things. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about that today, particularly around ethical frameworks and guidelines, how to potentially, one, develop them, socialize them, enforce them, and use them to actually benefit the development of AI rather than hinder it.
You've been using this in the financial industry, as you mentioned, on preventing financial crimes. You've been so intimately involved in that. In the world of AI, obviously, we very recently had this conversation with some of the leaders from the Bangladesh government who talked specifically about the macro versus micro conversation. At the macro level, you can anonymize everything and it's easy. But at the micro level, for example, financial crime, to really find out who's causing that problem, you need access to that data. And where's that trade-off of responsible access? If you'd like to elaborate on that.
Sure. So historically, the access to that data, there was kind of 2 categories of data. There's publicly available information, things like news, things like understanding business ownership and beneficial ownership and ownership of companies, which is extremely important in the whole chain of anti-money laundering. But I think the data is usually and has always been extremely proprietary. So we're talking about very specific counts, individuals, entities, trades, money movement, and banks like to keep this they need to. There's various regulations why certain PII can't be disclosed, as well as their own proprietary trading information. And one of the challenges in developing these models for the industry, now kind of taking a bit of more of a macro picture, has been lack of data on bad behavior. We've tried to develop some models early on where we've looked to create consortiums of banks to share in some of this data. We've made some progress in the electronic communications sense, right? largely because FinCEN is also a large helper there. But when we talk about actual money movement, that's been a challenge. And I think, for us to be able to better train our models and be able to better evolve them responsibly, I think we need more ways where we have cross-industry or cross-firm collaboration.
Wonderful. So really, it brings up two interesting points. One obviously is the future of the digital currency, because obviously there's a sovereignty question attached to that, and then the question around, to your point on the models themselves being trained on proprietary data. For every organization is not going to pool all that proprietary data in one place to train a comprehensive model. If you don't have a comprehensive model, it doesn't have the connections within itself to actually solve the financial crime. So is financial crime never going to be solved in the future, or at least elevated through AI because of these boundaries? And if so, how do you see that emerging?
Well, I'll tell you, we'll never get solved, right? It's a cat and mouse game, and it always will be. It's a matter of looking to strengthen the enforcement of it. And that's done through various regulatory frameworks, international agreements, industry standards that we put in place, and they all have helped. I mean, if we go back to the Patriot Act in the 2000s, that was immensely helpful in helping us to combat financial crime.
I just want to get a little bit of your lens on the digital currencies and how you see that evolving. A lot is happening around tokenization. That's a big question. We've seen the adoption of Bitcoin all around the world, and not just Bitcoin, several other technologies around there. How do you see those technologies sort of converging with AI? Because one of the big questions always in everybody's mind is, how do the two worlds, the world of tokenization, which has kind of been there for almost over a decade now, more actively in the world, and the world of AI that's obviously now center stage today. How do these collide, and how do they come together, especially around the financial industry and financial crime?
Sure. So as the use of digital currencies continues to grow, and in my opinion, it will continue to grow, I think it actually makes it easier because of the blockchain. It's kind of a godsend when you think of a immutable ledger to be able to track movement. So I believe that the digital currencies, yes, we're going to have to kind of change the way we think about merging both digital and analog behavior, as I can put it, and merging the two. But I do believe that the blockchain is an immense help in that.
We'll go back to an area we are both familiar with intimately, the stock exchanges and clearing and settlement. Post-trade clearing and settlement historically was T+4, T+5. It went down to T+1. That's our deadline coming up next year. 6 months from now, about 7 months from now, we're going to be T+1. In an ideal world, everybody wants T+0. You want everything to work like a PayPal or like an instant wallet. You hit the button and the money is there. What does that mean in reality in the AI world, and also to financial crime? So that'd be something we'd love to hear, Robert, what you think about that.
I think we need to maintain a long-term perspective on AI development. I think we need to avoid sacrificing tactical consideration for short-term gains, and really prioritize the enduring benefits of responsible AI technologies. Like I said before, we continue to do this through industry groups, through impact assessments, international collaboration, and I think also agile regulation. Look, the regulators, clearly have seen this coming for some time. Developing regulations and policies that are agile and adaptable to the evolving nature of AI is really going to be a big part of this. I think they need to strike a balance between enabling innovation in AI, and then, again, back to my soapbox, safeguarding ethical principles.
One of the things that we've been kind of trying to hone in as we talk about this topic of data and governance is this acronym that we use, EAT, which is what is the data AI is going to eat, E for entity, A for activity, T for transaction. Bring this back to your knowledge within the financial data world. How would you think in these three buckets, financial entity data, as well as the activity data versus transactional data? And if you want to share some of your experience and how you saw this being tackled in the past, before the AI world, and as you've seen it grow, and how do you see this going further as we move along further down the path of AI?
So entity data, I see that has been adopted by the financial services industries as being shareable. Activity and transactional data, not so. Again, a lot of this has to do with privacy of clients and various data privacy regulations, and also depends on where in the world we're talking about, right? Switzerland is going to be very different than the United States, which will be very different from Singapore. So I still feel as though, entity, much progress. Activity and transaction data, extremely limited.
I'd love to get your lens on where you think on activity and transaction data specifically. What sort of attributes do you think the financial industry may be open to sharing?
I think product and portfolio, absolutely. I don't see the individual, what I would call transaction level data being available and shareable, interested in sharing at any time soon. Maybe there's kind of two camps, right? I call them democratic and illiberal actors. And when we think about the democratic actors, very much thinking about transparency, accountability, multi-stakeholder approaches, open markets, versus the illiberal actors that want very much control and surveillance, state-centric governance, censorship of information. And as we're looking at a global environment, Ed, right, remember, you're seeing a complete spectrum, right, of both democratic and illiberal approaches. So that will, I think, continue to hinder our progress.
So very well said. I think it's the basic trade-off between autonomy versus control, and I think that debate will go on for a while. But before we part, I would love for you to kind of give one thought or question that's in your mind that you think we should use to continue this dialogue further and continue the conversation as we go down this journey of world digital governance.
Sure. How do we better collaborate, right? I think it's possible to govern AI principles. We've talked about a lot of mechanisms and approaches that can be employed to do so. We've talked about regulatory frameworks, guidelines, standards, oversight mechanisms, whistleblower protections. But I think that it's an evolving process, and it definitely requires a tremendous amount of collaboration, which kudos to you, Ed, for pulling together this forum, because I think this is one of many steps that we need to continue to pursue.
Well, thank you, Robert. Thank you for being here, and thank you for reinforcing the message of collaboration, because that's what world digital governance is all about, a space for conversation around governing our digital lives, collaborating, and then building consensus around all these different governance organizations and bodies that are already trying to do great work. So thank you again for joining.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate you. Thank you having me.